We are here with New Bedford artist Kayla Conchinha Connor, and it's very special because we are here in her home studio and we are going to have a live art demo from her. And I'm so happy to be here with you, Kayla. Thank you so much for inviting us into your home studio.
Thank you, Margot. I appreciate your coming today.
Great. So first, I would love for you to tell us all about your art. How did you begin and how did you develop into watercolor specifically?
Okay, so when maybe about 2019, actually we got to go back, way back. So I was 13 years old when I had my hip fused, and I kind of just went with it. I wasn't able to move my hip a lot, so that limited me physically, and instead of, kind of dealing with it, I pretended it didn't happen, and I just kept going and kept going. I had 2 kids, and then by the time the second one was a toddler, I was burnt out and I needed a hip replacement. So that happened right around COVID, so I was stuck in the house and I was recovering. I couldn't move, so I started doing watercolor specifically. I mean, I've always done art, but it really hit. I was just sitting there painting every day, kind of like Frida. A lot of times in bed, mostly in bed, but now I have, more room to spread out. Watercolor specifically because it's unpredictable. I kind of had to go with the flow. It's a metaphor. Stop trying so hard to make things fit and just go with the water and the paint. So that's why I started watercoloring. And then as that progressed, I started getting images. And I would just paint the images, and that was just one after the other, and then I just had so many paintings.
So what I'm hearing from you talking about this is that the painting helped you heal.
It did.
That is so wonderful and inspiring. And as you are using the watercolor and you had to go with the flow, what kind of images came up? Like, what kind of things did you start painting?
So I'm trying to think. I do a lot of gods and goddesses. I've done mythical creatures. These are just things that I started having visions of, and then I'd keep seeing them until I painted them, and it was just one after the other. Let's see, the apple tree, Ouroboros, Isis, certain birds, lots of birds, lots and lots of birds. I think it has something to do with freedom and, lifting off of the ground. Let me think. And then a lot of tarot as well. I did a lot of tarot cards, but that was more of just it was helpful learning the process, lots of practice.
Had you been practicing tarot before you got into painting? Like, which came first? Were you spiritual and then the painting helped you further that, vice versa?
That's a really good question. I got my first deck of tarot cards when I was in the hospital with my son, my firstborn, and I wouldn't say I was very spiritual at the time, but as I raised them, I started to, read cards for others. I started having visions and going with them. My intuition got stronger. There was a lot of disconnect when I was sick with my body, and the paint and the tarot kind of combined, the symbolism combined to reconnect me with my intuition and my body. And now I'm painting a lot.
Well, I love all of your work.
Thank you.
We own some of it.
Yes.
Yes. And so, New Bedford Creative, you received one of our grants last year. Was that helpful for you? And if so, how did you use that grant?
the New Bedford Creative Grant was amazingly helpful to me. I immediately used it to help receive supplies. I got a lot of different paints. Those were a little bit more pricey brushes, and kind of up-leveled my work. I also was able to publish a book of poems and art that I've kind of been working on for a few years now, and I with the little bit of extra funds, I was able to publish it and release it, and that's been amazing.
Awesome. And you have it here, right?
Yes.
Okay, let's take a look at it.
This is my book. It's The Little Seashell. And it's based on the major arcana. I painted all of the tarot major arcana cards. And I have poems to go with them. So it goes through basically my journey, the Fool's Journey, from before I was hurt, and healing. And basically the idea is that I've gone on my own hero's journey throughout the past few years, and I'm so grateful to make it, a physical object to hold and share.
It's beautiful. And so your name, Conchinha?
Yes, my name is, my maiden name is Conchinha, and that means little seashell. So the little seashell.
Beautiful. And did you already have the paintings to go along with the poems? How did you create the book?
Most of the paintings were done before I received the grant, and I was wondering, how am I going to make use of this? And I was inspired to couple them with, I realized that a lot of the poems that I've written over the years fit with the themes of the major arcana, so I kind of fit them in. And then there was about 5 left that needed some, so I filled those in, and I have a complete story. Well, yeah, it's in little bits and pieces, but it's my story.
Beautiful. And how can people purchase the book if they're interested?
I have a website, kaylaconnor.com, Conner. And I also, you can message me. I ship. I have an Instagram and a Facebook, and I also sell at the Co-Creative Center. Sometimes I do pop-ups around town.
That is an excellent point. So how often do you do pop-up shops at the Co-Creative Center in downtown New Bedford?
I have been doing them, I'd say, every other month or so. I think the next one's going to be before Christmas. I haven't scheduled that one yet.
But. Okay, and the best way to find out is to follow you on Instagram?
Follow me on Instagram or Facebook. Yep.
Okay, great. And that would be at
Kayla Connor Arts.
Perfect. So since we're in your home studio, I would love for you to show us a little bit of how you go about creating one of your pieces. Do you mind?
No, I'd love to.
Okay, great. So what are you working on today?
Today I'm working on a painting of the god Shiva in his Nataraja form as the cosmic dancer. The idea is creating structure in chaos.
So watercolor is very finicky. You kind of just have to let go and work with what you got. I've been using these Japanese paints that I got when I was on vacation in Nantucket, and they're really fun, very bright. I love them. I used them for my panorama at Roots and Branches. That was really fun. I did a moving panorama. But the idea is the watercolor is transparent, and you have to build it up with color. I get out of my head and into my body, and that's when I make the best work. I was inspired to paint this Nataraja because I had been seeing him repeatedly in my reality, and I looked him up, as I do. If a bird sings, I'm like, what kind of bird is that? What does the symbolism mean? And the idea is kind of destroying the old and creating the new. So he needed a painting. I usually start with, so I've seen this specifically around, and so I took a sketch of it from this, and then I'm using it as a basis to start my painting, and then I kind of go from there. I like to get the colors down, and then I go in for the details once it's dry.
So Kayla, you saw this in black and white, but I see you using these colors. How do you determine which colors you're using?
It's strange to say I use my third eye, but it's kind of, it's a compulsion. I know what color it's going to be. A lot of times there's symbolism behind the colors. The blue's kind of a deep sky, but also the ocean. The idea is it's the chaos, the primordial soup. And then I go from there.
So in addition to, the spiritual and mythical, I have noticed that you also paint New Bedford references. When did you start painting those New Bedford references?
I have been painting what I see too. I don't just paint what I see with my third eye, I also paint what I see with my physical eyes. With the Orpheum Theater, I live in the south end of New Bedford. I've been driving past it since I was a little girl, and it was just ingrained in my brain, so that's why I painted it.
And you did present at the New Bedford Lights Fine Arts Club. What was that experience like?
I was able to network. It was amazing. I met a lot of artists that were more experienced than me, and I was speaking with the public, explaining my methods, and that's not an opportunity that I had had before that. And it really brought me out of my shell.
And you sold some of your pieces as well, so bonus!
I brought 2 and I sold 3 that day.
Oh,
I don't know how, but that was a great day.
It was such a pleasure being here today. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for coming.
We are here with artist, educator, MFA, Alison Wells at Alison Wells Fine Art Studio and Gallery. Alison, thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for being here in my happy place.
Oh yes, it's an extremely happy place. So you and I are both ArtNet artists, one of the ArtNet 100, we'll say. What has your experience been like with ArtNet?
Oh, wonderful. I love working with organizations and communities that believe in artists and believe in our vision and our dream. It has not always been like that. And so when you have institutions that believe in it and support us in many ways, that's so wonderful.
And you were also a big part of this year's peer-to-peer sessions. You had 6 sessions. You had, and this is not an official stat, but it's close, probably the most amount of sellouts that I've seen, right, for a class to be fully registered. Tell me what your experience was like with peer-to-peer, and how do you find teaching?
Oh my gosh, it was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. Teaching has been with me for many years. I've been teaching for about let me see, 24 years
wow.
actually. I started in 2020 at high school teaching art. And it was just something, when I was younger, my mother always used to say, you should teach. When God gives you a talent, teach. And I'm like, oh, I don't have the patience to teach. No way, mommy, no. And then years went by, and then I got an offer to teach. And I'm like, oh boy, can I do this? Just because you're a good artist doesn't mean you're a good teacher.
Very true.
And so when I remember the first time in the classroom teaching, and I just felt like I was raised off the floor. Like it was something I just like, wow, I love this.
Gave you new life, right?
It did. And I always thought that was just one love, my art. But now teaching art and that they go hand in hand and it really comes together. So when I was teaching for peer-to-peer, it really was wonderful. I wasn't necessarily teaching art. I did that for one of the episodes, but the other ones were art business. And you know, things about your email list is gold, about, you know, gallery representation, stuff like that. And I found it was wonderful because actually I used the ArtNet grant to, you know, develop my online skills. So my business has been pivoting ever since COVID and going online. So I hired a coach to help me on this online market. So I'm learning so much about marketing, I'm learning about emails, I'm learning about the online platform, giving online courses, live courses, memberships, stuff like that. And I learned so much in that 1 year. I just felt like all I wanted to do was talk about it. All I wanted to do was teach other people. And so this was a perfect opportunity for me to pass it on. You know, God gives you a talent, pass it on. I learned something through ArtNet grant, and I passed it on to others. And so I was sharing what I knew. And I was so passionate about it. You can see, because I always tell people, you know, there's so many people you can talk this stuff about.
Yes.
My husband is like, oh, babe, you're talking shop again? Even on date night, I'm talking shop. So now to do the peer-to-peer, and people are coming to hear me teach and to talk with me, and we can talk about it. I totally nerded out. I loved it.
You did fantastic. I was there for all of them. I love them. They're all available on YouTube. So if anybody wants to check them out, they can look those up at New Bedford Creative. But they were absolutely vital to me as an artist. So I appreciate you for that. So as an artist who's been teaching and educating and involved in this community and back home, talk about being an artist back home, coming to New Bedford, and what your process is like, because I'm sure people are very interested in knowing about that.
Yes. Back home, so I studied art. I did my undergrad in art in Jamaica, because I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. And then after that, I taught at high school. And then I decided to do my master's degree. And that's when UMass Dartmouth came onto my vision. And I applied, got in, and that's what brought me here. But my work before was very about my culture. Trinidad and Tobago, we have carnival. We are the land of steel pan carnival. Yes. We invented the steel drum.
I did not know that.
Yes. So it is known as, it's a Caribbean instrument kind of thing, but it originally came from Trinidad.
Beautiful.
And so my work had a lot of that in it. And then I moved here, and it was so funny because my work was brightly colored. It was very, you know, carnival-esque, celebration, all of this. And we had to give a slideshow in my first year at UMass. And I remember talking about the work, and all the students, all my colleagues were like, oh, this is lovely. And then my work changed. And I loved the change because I felt I was really outside of the box. I was doing these large, kind of gray and black and white abstracts about the city, because I was in a new environment. And then my friends would laugh at me, and they would be like, she had these bright, lovely Caribbean paintings, and she came to New England, and now they're all gray.
Oh my God. Based on the weather, they could have just waited 5 minutes and would have painted something different.
But those were a pivotal part of my growth, and I love those paintings up to this day. And I actually learned so much about color. Like even those paintings had a lot of color in it. I have like an all white painting. It seems all white, but when you go in, it's a full color painting. There's so many different shades and hues of that white in there. And I remember learning that. I always say, you know, I learned about color when I went to UMass. I learned under Sig Haynes. And I always say he taught me color, and so I was able to move with color and really understand it. And I did love the pieces I did before. So when I graduated now, my Caribbean roots and all the ideas still came in, but in a different way, in a new way. And now I'm in this new city that I'm loving so much, And it's really fueling my energy because now I'm learning about the history of New Bedford. And I learned about the whaling industry, the Underground Railroad that just blew my mind. I became part of the New Bedford Historical Society, so I learned even more about it there. And so it infiltrated into my work. And this was the first time I was actually doing work about like showing history and teaching people about the history of a place and time. And that really did spark so many ideas in me. And so the whole series of New Bedford, and that started like 2009. I had my first it was actually 2011.
Okay.
I did a show. It wasn't my first show. The solo show in New Bedford was 2009. That was my Caribbean pieces.
Yes.
People loved it. And then the second show was my New Bedford show.
Oh.
And it was called Collage 02740. And I've constantly been doing more New Bedford works, but I always wanted to depict New Bedford and I didn't want it to be, I wanted to say, how could I depict it in a way that I can tell a story and also that it's not going to be just cheesy in terms of landscapes or buildings.
Yes.
And I decided collage was the key. And I always loved collage, but I never really did it to exhibit. It was always my happy place at the side.
Yes, something personal for you.
Yeah, and it was something, even in school, I was doing these large abstracts, but I would always do my little, when I would get stressed out to be in an MFA program, and I was like, oh, large, big paintings that is stressing me out, I would rip my paper and glue it and make these beautiful little collages. And I remember one of my professors did look at it and say, that's where the answer is. Not necessarily collage, but just the freedom I had with it. And so that it had a very playful feel. So in my work, it's a lot of layers. I do mixed media collage. So I use acrylic paint along with paper collage, textures, tactile textures coming off the surface and all of that. I could go on forever about my process.
I'm sure. I'm always interested in knowing what type of different paints and techniques and brushes and canvases artists are using. As somebody who just does with pencils myself, I like to think, what is it that you're using that you feel is kind of setting you apart or actually bringing you closer to the art? Because I see that there's so many different materials that people could use. What is your materials of preference?
Oh, I keep it very simple. So I do use acrylic paint. Now, I've painted in oils before, and I love oils. They're like butter when they go on. But the type of work I do, it doesn't really make for oils. So sometimes I do use oils, but like on top painting.
Yes.
Like if you use acrylic, you can add oils to the top, but you cannot do oil and then acrylic on top.
Okay.
So sometimes I might use oil in that way, but mainly acrylic just because I mix it with other mediums like paper collage, and so the oil will eat into the paper.
Oh, okay.
So I use acrylic. Another reason why I love acrylic is that it dries fast. Now some painters will tell you they hate that. It drives them crazy that acrylic dries so fast.
Why though?
Because they want to take their time in rendering something, so they prefer oil. Because oil is wet, it takes time, and and it's a different style of painting. So if they're doing a portrait or they're doing something else that they want to take their time to build. Now, people who do mixed media, and the way my brain works, I'm changing my mind, I'm moving, so I need that paint to dry. So the wet paint forever is just going to create a lot of problems. So I love working in acrylic in that way. I use paint brushes, but I also use like palette knives. And I'm found objects kind of person.
Okay.
So even I make some of my collage papers, I do repeated patterns with a cap, a bottle cap, and stuff like that. Or I would use a sponge to get really lovely sponged textures. I use plastic on top of paint to pull off and create textures. So I use a lot of found objects as well to get some intricate textural aspects in my work.
So, in a fine art studio gallery, you're going to find pieces like this that are fine art. And they're done usually by the artist who runs this studio. Alison has been working on this piece. This is a work in progress,
yes,
right?
Yes, almost.
So, how do you look at this as a blank canvas and then start to make these decisions as to where the lines go, what colors you're using, what shapes, what you're expressing. How did this piece come about?
Okay, so I started this piece in February, and I've just been so busy with other things, so I work a little bit on it, and then I will, take a break, work a little bit on it, and there's nothing more intimidating than the blank canvas, right? Blank canvas, blank journal, anything beginning. And so the way I do my paintings, I always, I start off with any kind of ground. So a black background, a red, it might be different colors. And they usually influence the other colors that go on top of it. Now, sometimes I might drip paint, I turn it, I mix it, I do all sorts of stuff. It starts off very, very abstract. This piece started off black because I wanted that depth. So you can kind of see the black background peeking through. And I love that because it creates a depth. It kind of pushes you a little further in from all of these other layers. So I started off with the black, and then I went in with paper collage. And so the thing about it with the paper collage, you go up close and then you can see some of it. It's not, some pieces I do where the whole piece is collage. It's a collage painting. No paint at all, just collage. And so you want to see the paper. But with pieces like this, I want to integrate it. I want you to feel that there's something else. And when you get closer, be like, oh, I see some texture. Is this, paper? Is this patterned? Whatever. But it creates the whole. So I started with the black, then the pieces of paper that I actually, like I have paper all around, and I make different collage papers with acrylic paint, just by hand, rolling, etc. And these are actually from jelly prints, so they are monoprints. And I do patterned ones, which are, monoprints, one print. And so I have a jelly plate here, which is very popular now. In school, we had a press, but when you graduate, where you find a printing press?
True.
So they invented these, which is so lovely. And I actually do classes, in-person and online classes. And so this winter, earlier this January and February, I gave a jelly printing class. So we did lots of different pattern papers, but I use my papers in these collage paintings. So that's where these papers are. And then I start doing layer after layer and then pulling through. And I learned this from my professors. A piece is never finished. When people say, how do you know when it's finished? But you can know it's never finished, but you know when it's resolved.
Yes.
So they always said you can resolve a piece. I think a piece can never really be finished. You always want to tinker with it, but you have sometimes you see it and you be like, yes.
Alison Wells, Master of Fine Arts, educator, shop owner, gallery owner, and community figure. We want to thank you for having us in your space today.
Thank you very much. I am honored to have you here.
We want to thank you for joining us here for another incredible and amazing episode of New Bedford Creative. We want to thank the two amazing artists who allowed us into their space, Kayla Connor, also known as Little Searshell, for her watercolor techniques, and Alison Wells, who allowed us into her William Street space downtown New Bedford and showed us her techniques and her patterns and spoke about her cultural history. We want to thank Margot Saunier for co-hosting this episode along with myself. We want to thank the city of New Bedford for all of their support. Thank you, and we hope to see you here again on New Bedford Creative.